Hello, listeners. In today's episode, I would like to send my greetings and love to everyone who has joined, is joining, or will be joining us later. I hope you're all doing well and staying healthy. Listeners, for the very first time, we are going to share the story of a visually impaired brother. I am going to present to you the story of a person named John T. Frey. His hometown is in Hialeah, Florida, a city in Miami. He studied at Hialeah Senior High School. This story revolves around that very school. In 2015, John T. Frey enrolled in this school. Everything was going on normally. The school building has several floors where the students attend their classes. Among the students, there was a separate floor for those who were visually impaired. Special arrangements were made to take care of them. Their care, their way of studying, and their method of learning were all managed through a separate system. Because they were not like the other regular students, the teachers were also very cautious about them so that they would not face any difficulties. Around 2016, a student enrolled whose home was in Miami Beach. His name was Marcus M. Schmitz. The boy was visually impaired. We usually notice that our visually impaired brothers or sisters have a special characteristic, an extraordinary memory. The reason behind this is that when we both see and hear at the same time, it creates a heavier load on our brain. To put it simply, think about recording a video on a mobile phone. Notice how much memory the video consumes. But if you record only the audio for the same duration, it takes up far less space. From this, it becomes clear that for those of us who see with our eyes and hear with our ears, a large portion of the brain is engaged, and the hormones triggered in the brain are much higher when sight is involved. But in the case of the visually impaired, this is not so. They only listen, and because of that, what they hear stays in their memory for a long time without distortion. This is why they usually have a stronger ability to memorize as they listen.
However, this boy Marcus M. Schmitz was an exception. He was quite overweight, and because of his body size, he could not move around normally. On top of that, he had another serious problem. He could not see. Unlike other visually impaired students, who often gained the advantage of retaining what they studied through their strong memory, Marcus could not remember what he learned at all. His body was so heavy that it made movement difficult, and at the same time, he was blind. He was a very naive, simple, and easygoing boy. Because of this simplicity, many people used to make fun of him. Quite a few students at school, those who were considered normal, would often joke about him. But there were also others who felt a deep sense of sympathy toward him, and they would help him in various ways. Among them was one person who, although a student himself, acted very much like a teacher to him. He would always scold him, love him, and guide him like a mentor. His name was Edward G. Alexander. He truly played the role of a guardian, disciplining him, caring for him, and supporting him. What Edward G. Alexander noticed was that when Marcus M. Schmitz was admitted to school, he couldn't eat the regular meals provided there. During lunch, while everyone else ate quickly, Marcus ate very slowly. He struggled because after mealtime, classes would begin again. Edward, acting like an older brother, would scold him. "What's the matter with you? Why don't you eat faster?" Marcus would explain that he had various physical problems, and because of that, his parents had always given him special meals. He wasn't used to ordinary food, so it was difficult for him to eat. Still, he was trying to get accustomed little by little. Edward not only helped him adapt to these situations, but also advised and assisted him in many other ways, just like a true guardian would. Interestingly, Edward himself also had vision impairment. For a while after Marcus enrolled in 2016, things went fairly well. But on August 2nd of the same year, a terrible incident occurred. Before that, however, another issue had taken place. The visually impaired students were shifted to a new floor, which had newly installed tiles. These tiles weren't textured, they were somewhat slippery, especially if there was a little water on them. One day, while classes were going on, Merkus asked permission from the teacher to go to the restroom. On his way, because of the slippery tiles, he slipped and fell hard. Time passed, but he didn't return. The teacher became concerned. What's going on? Why hasn't Merkus come back? Did something happen to him? The teacher went outside and was shocked to see a terrible sight. Merkus was lying flat on his back, gasping heavily for air. The teacher pulled him up and asked what had happened. Merkus said he had slipped, and because of his heavy body, he couldn't get up. Something must have gone wrong, but he couldn't even cry out for help. From then on, Merkus began experiencing further problems. He already had physical issues, but the fall left him with severe pain in his back. Doctors examined him, and the test results revealed that his spine had fractured. Because of his weight and condition, it was very difficult to move him or take care of him. Still, the teachers and students all came together to look after him. His parents, who loved him dearly, rushed over when they heard what had happened. Unlike in many families where a child with disabilities might face neglect, Merkus's family loved and cared for him deeply. Soon after, his parents took him for more advanced treatment, but only a short time later, on August 2nd at around 3:30 p.m., news came from Jackson Memorial Hospital that Merkus M. Schmitz had passed away. Merkus's home was in Miami Beach. After his death, his body was first brought back to the school. In the basement, his body was laid out so that everyone could see him one last time. Even John T. Frey came to pay his respects. Afterward, his body was taken home, where he was buried. Teachers and sighted students noticed something unusual. Before his death, Merkus's face looked normal, but afterward, his face seemed to glow with a kind of divine light. A mysterious smile appeared on his lips, as if he were peacefully asleep and dreaming. Everyone was heartbroken over his passing. Not everyone had treated Merkus kindly during his life. Some students had been cruel to him, mocking or mistreating him. Once, someone asked him, "Doesn't it hurt you when people treat you badly like that?" Merkus simply replied, "No, it doesn't hurt me." At one point, someone asked him, "What do you feel?" What would you ask from the Creator? What would make you happy? Merkus M. Schmitz replied, "If the Creator were to take me away from this world, I would be very happy. Because with this body, I can't move properly. I suffer from many physical difficulties. I cannot see, my intelligence is limited, and I cannot remember my studies. What is the point of such a life? I feel a deep disgust toward my own life." He shared these feelings especially with Corey T. Easterling. Listeners, up until now I have shared some background about Merkus M. Schmitz with you. Now, let us move to the main incident. What actually happened? Among the students who mistreated Merkus was one named Edgardo J. Casper. A few days after Merkus's death, Donald L. Schreiber had a terrifying dream. In the dream, he saw Merkus M. Schmitz grabbing his hand and pulling him. Donald was lying down, and Merkus said, "Donald, is this really the time to sleep? Today is not a day for sleep. Come with me." Saying this, Merkus pulled him by the hand, leading him down the stairs from the second floor, pulling him to the exact place where Merkus's body had been washed before his burial. Donald woke up screaming from the dream. Horrified, he later shared this with others. But the very next day, something else happened, not in a dream, but in reality. In the dormitory where Corey T. Easterling slept, there were special steel bunk beds, single-story, double-story, and triple-story types, made for the visually impaired students. Corey slept on the third tier of such a bed, climbing up by a small ladder. Near him, Edgardo J. Casper was also sleeping, and John T. Frey was nearby as well. In the middle of the night, suddenly Edgardo J. Casper shouted, "Go away! Go away from here! Leave, now!" His loud voice woke up the others. "Edgardo?" he answered. "I just heard Merkus M. Schmitz's voice." Was it only in his dream? Number. He insisted it was real. He said that suddenly he felt his bed shaking. Though two others were sleeping in the bunks below, they felt nothing. Edgardo said he could hear cries and wails coming from his right side, left side, above his head, near his feet, and even overhead. The crying, he swore, was none other than Marcus M. Schmitz's voice. The cries surrounded him from every direction. That was when he screamed, "Go away! Leave this place!" This terrified everyone, and the story spread among other students and teachers. The following day, the same thing happened again. Meanwhile, Donald L. Schreiber, the very one who used to tease Marcus, kept having the same recurring dream. Marcus would appear, grab his hand, and try to drag him toward the place where his body had been washed before burial. Donald became extremely fearful. The second time such incidents occurred, Corey T. Easterling and others were deeply disturbed. Since all of them were visually impaired, no sighted boy could have sneaked in to play tricks on them. To make sure, another boy named Liam was placed there. That night, it began to rain. Around 2:30 a.m., while Liam lay on Corey's third-tier bunk, the weather turned very cold. Suddenly, Liam felt the atmosphere in the room grow unnaturally freezing. Then, he saw something horrifying. A large, dark, shadowy figure floating in the air near his feet, slowly approaching him. The figure said, "What are you doing here? Where is the owner of this bed? Never sleep here again. Get out of here." Liam was terrified. He screamed, and at once the figure vanished. He told everyone what he had seen. Yet, he dared to sleep there again another night. Once more, he witnessed the same shadowy figure. It was pitch black, with no clear facial features, but this time it spoke in Marcus M. Schmitz's very voice, saying, "What are you doing here? Where is the owner of this bed?" Liam could hear it clearly. As for Corey T. Easterling, he was so frightened that he refused to sleep on that bunk again. He was already struggling with his visual impairment. Adding such terrifying experiences only made things far worse. Naturally, people with disabilities already face many obstacles in life. On top of that, when problems like these begin, it becomes extremely difficult for them. At different times, many people face different kinds of challenges. For example, there is a teacher named Jeremy C. McVeigh. He teaches English classes to visually impaired students. Interestingly, Jeremy C. McVeigh himself often dreams of Marcus M. Schmitz, seeing him asking for something, though it's not clear what exactly he wants. The dream keeps repeating, and since the problem has grown more severe, the question arises, how can this be solved? At that point, John T. Frey also gets involved, as the same incidents keep happening with Edgardo J. Casper. On the other hand, with Donald L. Schreiber, the incidents seem to have reduced significantly, and for some people, they've stopped completely. But Edgardo J. Casper could not escape this problem. Finally, he was taken to a well-known shaman. After hearing everything, the shaman assured him that it was nothing serious and would soon be resolved. He performed some rituals, including ruqya and spiritual healing. And, truly, after that day, Edgardo J. Casper never faced the problem again. That's how the issue finally came to an end. Listeners, you've just heard the story. Marcus M. Schmitz is a visually impaired man who also suffered from several other physical problems. And as we know, many people around us face such difficulties. Let me share a personal experience. Since I work in an educational institution, I sometimes come across students who show signs that are not entirely normal. I've noticed that many other students don't treat them well, and because of this, the affected student becomes even more mentally distressed. Whenever I notice such situations, I try to address them. I talk to the other students, reminding them not to use words or behaviors that might hurt these children's feelings. Over time, as these students mix with others in a healthy way, they begin to adjust and act more normally.
Children with disabilities often grow up receiving extra care and love from their families, but when they step outside, into schools or society, they don't always get the same treatment. As a result, they become mentally broken.
That's why we must remain aware of such issues. We need to understand their needs, their thoughts, and their feelings. If we are careful, they too can gradually adapt to a normal life. Because, after all, the Creator did not make everyone the same. Some people face different challenges. Especially when someone has a mental disability or intellectual limitations, they are often treated differently. We must not grow frustrated with them. Instead, we should treat them with kindness, patience, and responsibility. That's what our role should be, even if we don't always manage to do it. May the Creator forgive us. Still, we must continue trying to treat these people with kindness and give them the same opportunities to grow up as any other child. Listeners, Marcus M. Schmitz had actually slipped and fallen, which greatly worsened his physical condition. As a result of that injury, he eventually passed away. May the Creator forgive his faults and shortcomings. There were so many things in this world that he never even got to see, things that we witness every day, often while committing sins ourselves. Listeners, now let's move on to the next story in today's episode. Now, the story I'm going to share with you was sent to us by Martin B. Cox. This incident actually happened to his grandfather. Martin B. Cox heard the story from his wife, and today I'll be sharing it with all of you. So, let's begin. The incident took place sometime after 1975. The exact year isn't clear, nor the exact time of year, but we do know it wasn't winter. At that time, Mark C. Sweat was around 15 or 16 years old. Back then, in his village, there were no good educational institutions. Because of this, his family was searching for a better school where he could study. During that period, the Texas region already had some well-known institutions. For this reason, Mark C. Sweat was admitted to one of those schools in Texas. In that institution, students usually stayed in lodging houses arranged by the local community. Some students stayed overnight, especially the older ones, bringing their meals along. The younger students often stayed at their lodging houses at night and came to school early in the morning. The lodging houses were not far away. They were arranged conveniently nearby, and the local people cooperated with the school in organizing everything sincerely. In this way, life was running smoothly, and Mark C. Sweat was studying well without facing any problems. The school where Mark C. Sweat studied had a lodging house nearby. The house wasn't very far, only about 200 to 250 meters away, roughly a quarter of a kilometer. Before reaching the lodging house, there was a fairly large garden filled with different kinds of trees. Among them stood a very tall palm tree. Beside it ran a small canal, more like a stream than a real river, where fishermen often came to catch fish. Though Mark was only about 15 or 16 years old, he had a strong, well-built physique for his age. He was also very religious-minded, having grown up in a devout environment since childhood. Compared to the other students, his manners were polite, humble, and refined. He did not always stay at the lodging house at night. He went there occasionally, if it was late, if the weather turned stormy, or in other special circumstances. Otherwise, he would return in the early morning. The owner of the lodging house was Kurt D. Strunk, who loved Mark dearly, caring for him with affection and kindness. Everything was going normally until a strange problem arose. Mark began to see, in his sleep, a female figure appearing to him in dreams. The woman's figure would come to him in different ways, not to frighten him, but speaking softly, saying things like, "I will take you with me. I like you, Mark." Terrified, would beg her in his dreams, "Don't come near me. Stay away from me." But these dreams kept returning. Many times he would wake up in fear. Because of this, when he stayed at school, he often asked one of his classmates to sleep beside him, so he wouldn't feel so afraid. Sometimes, when a friend did sleep next to him, he wouldn't see the dreams at all. One night, however, Mark went to the lodging house because the weather was bad. He decided not to return to school that night, but planned to go in the morning. The next morning, Kurt D. Strunk noticed something unusual in the yard. A lantern had been left standing upright, still faintly burning, even though morning had already come. He also saw that the door to Mark's room was wide open. This immediately made Kurt suspicious. He thought, "This is not normal." Even if Mark went outside, he would have closed the door behind him. If he had gone to school early in the morning, he wouldn't have left the lantern burning in the yard. Something is wrong. Kurt quickly went to the school and asked the teacher,
"Where is Mark C. Sweat?" The teacher replied, "He didn't show up last night for dinner, and he hasn't come this morning either." Usually when students stay away, they still return early in the morning. All the other students have come, but Mark has not. At once, Kurt understood that something bad must have happened. He began searching everywhere for Mark, but he couldn't be found. However, in the garden under the big palm tree, they found one of Mark's sandals. The discovery deepened the suspicion. One sandal is here, where is the other? Nearby ran the small canal. Could something have happened there? Fishermen cast nets into the water, but no sign of Mark appeared. Meanwhile, Kurt wrote a letter to Mark's parents back in his village in Denver. At that time, there were no mobile phones, and telephones were rare, only in important institutions. Mark's village had no telephone at all, so a letter had to be sent.
It would take at least 3 days to reach them. In the letter, written in consultation, quickly the fisherman picked him up and brought him back to Kurt D. Strunk's house. There, Kurt D. Strunk himself bathed the boy, changed his clothes, and tried to comfort him. The boy, Mark C. Sweat's grandfather, was too weak to speak at first. He could only say, "I'm very hungry. Please, I need rice to eat." Immediately, Kurt D. Strunk's wife cooked food for him, and after eating he began to feel a little normal again. By then, Kurt D. Strunk had already sent a letter to the boy's family, so they arrived shortly afterward. Everyone was relieved to see him alive, but they were also curious. Where had he been all those days? When he was finally calm, he began to explain. That night, after dinner, he had gone to sleep. Later in the night, he woke up needing to use the bathroom. As he stepped outside, he suddenly felt two soft hands grab both of his arms tightly and lift him up into the air. As he was being carried upward, his foot hit a branch of a palm tree, and one of his sandals slipped off. Looking down, he saw it falling onto one of the wide palm leaves, like the kind used to make hand fans. After that, he remembered nothing clearly. He fell into a trance, a dreamlike state where he had no control over his body. He only remembered floating in the air, with those two hands still gripping his arms. When he regained his senses, he found himself in a different world. In front of him were all kinds of foods and sweets, and there, standing before him, was the very fairy he had often seen in his dreams. She offered him sweets, urging him to eat. But even in that strange place, he remembered something his elders and teachers had warned him about. If someone eats the sweets offered in the world of the jinn, they can become enslaved to them forever. One couldn't go against their words. Mark C. Sweat absolutely would not eat that sweet. He wouldn't eat any food at all. He just kept crying continuously, sobbing uncontrollably. Seeing him cry like that, the fairy's parents scolded their daughter harshly. "How dare you bring someone else's child here like this? He didn't agree to come here. Why did you bring him? Take him back right now and never bother him again." But the fairy refused and said, "No, I won't take him back. I'll marry him." She kept saying things like that. Her parents grew extremely angry and even threatened her. Finally, at one point, the fairy said, "Fine, I'll take him back." That night, the fairy did return Mark C. Sweat, but by then several days had already passed. In fact, Mark C. Sweat couldn't clearly explain the whole situation. All he could say was that after he was taken there, he had cried a lot. Then, finally, they let him go. When she returned him, the fairy was so furious that, near the tall palm tree, she lowered him a little and then let him drop from about 10 cubits above the ground. It had rained that night, so the soil was very muddy. Mark C. Sweat fell right into that mud. By God's mercy, he didn't suffer any serious injuries, but his whole body was covered in mud. He was in a completely messy, filthy state. According to Mark C. Sweat's account, he was there for at most 1 day, but 3 to 5 days had actually passed. So,
Was he unconscious under that palm tree for 3 to 5 days? Or was he really in that place with the fairy's family for that long? It can't be said with certainty. After this incident, there always remained a suspicion or fear that the fairy might come back to trouble Mark C. Sweat again. Since his family had already arrived, they took him back to Denver to his own home. There, when he was shown to a skilled shaman, the shaman said that although Mark C. Sweat was not yet of marriageable age, he must be married right away. Otherwise, in the future, there could be even bigger problems. So Mark C. Sweat was married to a pious woman. They had 2 sons and 1 daughter, and all of them grew up to be devout.
Even now, they are all well and healthy, without any problems.
This was the incident. Listeners, stories of being taken into the world of fairies are something we've often heard, or perhaps you've heard them too. But in this case, the fairy's family forced their daughter to return him. Such incidents do exist, but that is less often heard. Many of us, after listening to these kinds of stories, start building a fantasy inside our minds, or we escape into a world of imagination. We think, what if it had happened to us? Could we face such a situation? What would we do? Different kinds of thoughts keep working in our minds. But listeners, those who have truly experienced such events can rarely return to normal life easily. Only a very small number of people, like Mark C. Sweat, have been able to return to normalcy because he made the right decision at the right time. He did not eat any food offered there, which was a very wise choice. His family members also went to a good shaman, and they immediately followed the advice given. Because of that, he did not suffer much, and his family is doing well. However, there are countless other incidents that have completely devastated people's lives. For a moment, just by seeing the face of a fairy, a person may fall under a spell, trapped in an illusion, unable to think of anything else. But eventually, that very enchantment turns into a curse. The truth is, such fairy encounters rarely bring good to people's lives. Most of the time, they destroy lives. Once again, I say, no one should ever wish for such experiences, neither for you nor for us. And those who are already facing them should not keep these matters secret. They should quickly consult a good scholar or spiritual guide to find a solution. In most cases, people are told, you must not tell anyone. If you do, harm will come to you. But eventually, the person becomes forced to speak out, and by then, much damage has already been done.
Damage that they themselves could not realize in time. In some cases, the story ends tragically, with death. We do not want such incidents to continue happening. Listeners, that is all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Many thanks to those who sent them in, and even more thanks